There is a specific kind of morning that people in your season know well. You open your eyes, and before a single thought forms, you already feel the weight of something that is still not there. You get up anyway. God sees that morning, and He has been building something in it that your eyes have not yet been given permission to see. Something is happening in your life right now that your enemies cannot see, not because it does not exist, but because God has deliberately hidden it from every eye that would have tried to interfere with it, every eye that celebrated when things fell apart for you, every eye that watched you struggle and concluded that you were finished, every eye that counted you out and moved on. They cannot see what is being built. And that invisibility is not a weakness in the plan. It is the plan, because what God builds in secret arrives with a power that what He builds in public never carries. There is a construction happening in the invisible dimensions of your life right now, silent, methodical, of an absolute precision that exceeds anything human hands could engineer. Foundations are being laid that will support weight your current circumstances cannot yet reveal. Connections are being established between people and moments and opportunities that will seem miraculous when they converge, but that have been in preparation for longer than you have been waiting. Doors are being prepared that will open with a speed that will make the duration of the waiting incomprehensible to the people who watch you walk through them. And while all of this is being built, while God is working with a precision and an intentionality that would take your breath away if you could see it, you are looking at the surface of your life and seeing what appears to be stillness. Nothing moving, nothing changing, nothing confirming that the promise is real and the calling is valid and the waiting has a destination rather than simply a duration. Chosen, I am speaking directly to you, not to a general audience, to you who are watching this video at this exact moment, to you who have been faithful in seasons that did not reward faithfulness with visible confirmation, to you whose enemies have looked at your life and concluded that God has forgotten you. They are wrong. God has not forgotten you, He has hidden you, and there is a profound difference between those two things that this message is going to make undeniable. What your enemies could not stop through opposition, God is completing through preparation. What they thought they ended when they walked away from you, God is using as the exact material from which He is building what comes next. The silence of your season is not the silence of abandonment. It is the silence of a construction site where the most important work happens underground, where no one can see the foundation being laid, where the depth of what is being built is protected from interference precisely because it is not yet visible. Your season of silence is God's season of construction, and what He is building cannot be touched by anyone who does not have access to the dimension in which He is building it. Let me describe with precision what this season of waiting and invisible construction does to a person from the inside, not from a comfortable distance, from the real place where the weight of it actually lives. The first thing it does is create a gap between what you know and what you see that becomes increasingly difficult to hold without cost. You know something, with a certainty that lives deeper than thought, and deeper than feeling, and deeper than the circumstances that seem to contradict it daily. You know that something was spoken over your life, a promise that felt too specific to be self-generated, a direction that arrived with a clarity that could not have come from your own imagination, a calling that has persisted through every season that seemed designed to extinguish it. You know what you received, but what you see, the surface of your daily life, the state of your relationships and your finances and your opportunities and your doors, does not match what you know. And holding that gap, choosing every single day to trust what you know over what you see, is a work of such sustained and invisible effort that most people around you have no idea it is happening. There is also something this season does to your relationship with the people who love you. You have learned to manage what you share about the waiting, not because you no longer believe, but because you have sat across from enough well-meaning people and watched the expression on their face shift in a way that communicated more than their words did. A subtle impatience. A gentle suggestion that perhaps it is time to adjust your expectations, a kindness that was trying to protect you from disappointment, but that landed as a quiet agreement with everything you were fighting against. And so you learned to carry the real weight of the waiting privately, to present a version of your faith that was true but edited, that did not require the people you loved to hold something they did not have the capacity to hold. You have the right to feel the cost of that. The loneliness of carrying something real in a space where it cannot be fully received is a real loneliness. It is not a sign of weak faith. It is not evidence that you have done something wrong. It is the honest experience of someone who has been entrusted with something that requires a larger container than the relationships currently available to them. And that loneliness, that specific and persistent loneliness of the one who carries what others cannot yet see, is one of the things God sees most clearly in your season, and one of the things He is most specifically building toward in what He has been preparing. There is also something that happens to your prayer life in an extended season of invisible construction. The prayers do not stop. For most people who are genuinely committed, they never fully stop, but they change in texture. There is a subtle shift from the open and expectant prayers of someone who has not yet been waiting long enough to have their expectation tested, to the quieter and more careful prayers of someone who has learned that the heart can only afford so much uncautious hope before the silence starts to cost something real. You still pray, but you pray differently, with a guardedness that was not there at the beginning, with a caution that feels like wisdom but sometimes feels like the first stage of giving up. And distinguishing between those two things in the middle of the night, when nothing has confirmed that the promise is still active, is one of the most quietly demanding spiritual challenges a person can face. And then there is the specific wound that comes from watching others receive what you have been waiting for. Not strangers, people you know, people whose faith you have observed and found real and genuine. People who have not necessarily waited as long as you have, or carried as much as you have carried. You have watched them receive their answer. And you have felt something in that moment that you have never fully admitted out loud. Not hatred, not pure jealousy. Something more complicated and more painful than either of those. A confusion that goes to the core of how you understand the way God works. If He answered them, if He moved for them, if He came through in the way they needed, why has He not done the same for you? Not yet. Still not yet. That question is not a sign of failed faith. It is the honest interior of someone whose investment in God is total enough that His apparent delays feel personal. And it deserves an honest answer rather than a spiritual platitude. Here is the truth that God wants to place in the deepest layer of your understanding today. What He has been building in your silence is protected by your silence. The invisibility of your season is not a flaw in the plan. It is the plan's most important feature. Consider what happened with Joseph. This young man received a dream, a genuine prophetic word about a destiny that was real and from God, and then almost immediately everything moved in the exact opposite direction of the dream. Betrayal by his brothers, slavery in Egypt, false accusation, prison. Years of invisibility, so complete that the people who had the power to help him forgot about him entirely. From the outside, his life looked like the systematic destruction of a destiny. But here is what was actually happening in those years that looked like destruction. In Genesis 50 verse 20, Joseph says to the very brothers who sold him into slavery, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done." God intended it. Not merely allowed it, intended it. The invisibility was not a detour from the destiny. It was the precise path through which the destiny arrived at the platform from which it could do the most good. Here is the first truth I want to anchor in your understanding. What your enemies meant as your ending, God is using as your entrance. Every closed door was protecting you from an arrival that would have been premature. Every relationship that ended was removing something that would have complicated what was coming. Every season of public invisibility was preventing premature exposure that would have given opposition access to something it had no right to touch. The silence was not punishment, it was protection. God hides in the wilderness what He is preparing to reveal in the palace. And the duration of the hiding is always proportional to the magnitude of what is being revealed. Watchman Nee wrote that God's delays are not God's denials, that what appears to be God's inactivity is almost always God's most intensive activity, happening in dimensions that human eyes cannot access. The silence you have been living in is not the silence of a God who has forgotten your name. It is the silence of a God who is working so precisely and so intentionally on your behalf that the work itself cannot be interrupted by your awareness of it. Here is the second truth. God is building something that your enemies cannot touch because they cannot see it. In Isaiah 54 verse 17, the promise is clear. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. That promise does not mean that weapons will not be formed. It means that none of them will succeed against what God has ordained. Your enemies have formed weapons. Some of them have landed. Some of them have cost you things that were real and precious and worth grieving. But none of them have been able to reach what God has been building in the invisible. Because the invisible is outside their jurisdiction, they can affect your circumstances. They cannot affect your destiny. They can delay your timeline. They cannot cancel your calling. They can make the waiting longer. They cannot make the promise smaller. Here is the third truth, and this is the one I want you to carry long after this message ends. In Habakkuk 2 verse 3, God speaks to a prophet who is waiting and not yet seeing, for still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end, and it will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. The vision has an appointed time. It hastens toward it. It is not running late. It is arriving at the exact moment when what God has been building is ready to receive it, and the person carrying the promise is ready to carry what the vision requires. Your enemies have not delayed your destiny. They have not shortened your promise. They have not reduced what God prepared for you before you were born. They have only confirmed that what is coming is significant enough to have attracted their opposition. And the opposition of your enemies is one of the clearest signs available that what God is building for you is worth fighting against. Chosen. My question for you today is this. If you could genuinely believe that God has been building something in your silence that your enemies cannot see or touch or stop, how would you hold the waiting differently, starting today? Let that question find the places in you where the silence has felt most like abandonment, because those are the places where the construction is most advanced. Let me show you what someone looks like who has genuinely understood that God builds in secret what he reveals in public, who has stopped reading the silence as evidence against them and started receiving it as confirmation that what is being built is too significant for premature exposure. The first transformation is in the way they carry themselves in the waiting. Before this understanding, for most people in an extended season of invisible construction, the waiting produces a posture, a slight forward lean of someone who is always straining to see whether anything has changed, a guardedness in the eyes of someone who has learned to protect themselves from hope that has been deferred too many times, a heaviness in the shoulders of someone who has been carrying something alone for longer than they anticipated. These physical signatures of the waiting are real, and they are understandable, but they are also visible to the wrong people, and the enemy knows how to read them. After this understanding settles in, something changes in the posture, not a performance of confidence, not a pretense that the waiting is not real, but a genuine shift in the center of gravity, from someone who is waiting for something to change on the outside, to someone who knows that something has already changed on the inside, and that the outside is simply catching up to what God has already established in the invisible. This shift is visible. It is visible to the people around you. It is visible to the people who were watching to see if you would break. And what they see when they look at you now is not what they expected to see, which is itself a sign that what God has been building has begun to manifest even before the visible confirmation arrives. The second transformation is in their relationship with opposition. Before this understanding, opposition feels like evidence, like proof that the promise was wrong, or the timing was off, or the calling was too ambitious. Every closed door confirms the story that the enemy has been trying to write over their life. Every setback becomes another data point in the case against their destiny. After this understanding, opposition becomes information rather than evidence. Specifically, it becomes information about the significance of what is being built. Because if there were nothing worth opposing, there would be no opposition. The intensity of the resistance you have faced is one of the most accurate measurements available of the magnitude of what God is preparing to release through your life. Your enemies have not been opposing you, they have been confirming you. Every weapon they formed was a declaration that what God put inside you is dangerous enough to be worth targeting. And a chosen one who understands this does not shrink from opposition. They recognize it, and they understand that it means they are closer to the manifestation than they were before the opposition arrived. The third transformation is in their capacity to encourage others who are in their own season of invisible construction. There is a person in your life right now, perhaps several people, who are in a season that looks like silence and emptiness and nothing moving. And they need something that most of the people around them cannot give them. Not encouragement from the outside, encouragement from someone who has been in the same place, who has held the same silence, who has carried the same weight of a promise that had not yet manifested, and who can sit with them in their season and say with the authority of personal experience, God is building. What you cannot see is real. What feels like nothing is everything. And what is coming is worth every day of the waiting it took to prepare for it. That kind of encouragement, that specific authority, is one of the things God has been building in you through your season of silence. And it is one of the most powerful gifts you will carry into the next season of your life. Imagine the morning when the thing that has been building in the invisible finally breaks through the surface of your visible life, not gradually, suddenly. The way dawn does not arrive slowly but appears all at once when the angle of the earth finally aligns with the light. You will look back at the silence of this season and understand it with a clarity that is not available to you from inside it. You will see the foundations that were laid in the nights when nothing seemed to be happening. You will see the connections that were being established in the seasons that felt like setbacks. You will see the precision of the timing and recognize that every day that felt like delay was actually a day of preparation for an arrival that required exactly that much preparation. And you will understand something about God that cannot be understood any other way. That his silence is never empty. That his hiding is always for the purpose of a greater revealing. And that what he builds in secret always arrives with more power than what he builds in public. Chosen. I want to finish with this. What God has been building in your silence cannot be seen by the people who counted you out, cannot be touched by the people who worked against you, cannot be slowed by the people who celebrated when things fell apart, cannot be stopped by anyone who does not have access to the dimension in which God does his most important work. You have been faithful in a season that did not reward faithfulness with visible confirmation. You have held a promise in seasons that gave you every logical reason to release it. You have continued to show up, to pray, to believe, to move forward with the specific and costly obedience of someone who trusts the God who called them more than they trust the circumstances that seem to contradict the calling. That faithfulness has not been wasted. It has been building something real. Something that is more advanced in its construction than the silence of your season has allowed you to see. Stay faithful in the silence. Not because the silence is comfortable, it is not. Not because the waiting is easy, it is not. But because the one who called you is the same one who is building. And what he builds is always worth the time it takes to build it properly. Every foundation he lays in the invisible will support the weight of what he reveals in the visible. Every connection he establishes in the hidden season will be exactly the connection required in the public season. Every day of the waiting will make sense on the day when what has been building finally arrives. Your enemies expected your silence to break you. Instead, it has been building you into exactly the kind of person who can carry what is coming. And what is coming cannot be stopped by anyone who tried to stop you, because it was never in their jurisdiction to begin with. What breaks you open is what lets the light in.